When I first got into documentary filmmaking and photography, a huge reason I was drawn to docs over commercials or Hollywood was because I was interested in seeing the world and learning about how people lived in other cultures. Personally, I wanted to see real life and capture the variety of human experiences rather than create images in a controlled space. And over the course of my career in this business, I've gone to more amazing places and met more interesting people than I ever imagined possible. I wasn't born rich and I don't have a trust fund, but I managed to spend nearly 15 years living internationally and making a living with a camera. And if you're into that kind of thing, you can do it too. In this video, I'm gonna get into the pros and cons of living internationally, how to make a move like this in the right way without just being some annoying foreigner driving up prices for locals. Then at the end, I'll give you my top 3 places that I'd think about moving to if I were starting again. Okay, let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Luke Forsyth, and on this channel, I teach the skills and tricks I've learned over 10 years working as a documentary filmmaker and photographer. Just to set the stage here, I didn't grow up the son of UN diplomats or have a credit card that someone else paid the bill for. I'm from a small town of 28,000 people in Canada, and while I'm lucky enough that my parents did travel and expose me to other places, for the most part, as a kid, I just wanted to eat Doritos in the garage and play Mario Kart. If you knew me at 12 years old, I doubt anyone would have predicted that I'd spend most of my adult life living internationally, myself least of all. But in the summer before my final year of high school, a couple older friends who are graduating invited me to go on a 6-week backpacking trip through Europe with them, and it really changed my life. The freedom of the road and waking up every day in a new place with no agenda other than to try and see something interesting was instantly addicting for me, and even though I was only 17 and still had to get through another year of high school and then university, I knew that I was gonna do whatever it took to keep me living that kind of life eventually. When I got out of college, I headed for Australia and New Zealand for around a year each, where I worked on fruit farms and a bunch of other random labor jobs like construction and warehouses, and even as a deckhand on a sailboat. Pretty much anything to stay away from Canada for as long as possible was my mission. When my body started to need a rest, I got a job as an English teacher in South Korea and stayed there for about 2 years. Teaching was fine, and I made some really amazing friends there, but I kind of knew that teaching wasn't my calling in life, and I started looking around for something else that I could do that would keep me on the move. Then I saw the documentary War Photographer, an Oscar winner about one of my photojournalism icons, James Nachtwey, and I knew I'd pretty much found the thing I wanted to dedicate my life to. I cashed in my teacher savings, enrolled in a workshop, and spent almost 2 years building a portfolio, and then eventually moved to Cambodia to start my professional career as a freelance photojournalist. I stayed there for around 4 years, and then eventually I made the jump to Mexico, where I moved into documentary filmmaking, and the rest is history. The point of all that wasn't to brag about doing cool stuff. I'm just trying to show that there was nothing special about what I did, and that if you're motivated by the same things as me and are lucky enough to have the freedom to pack up and go, you can do the same thing too. Now, you can absolutely have a long and productive career as a documentary filmmaker living anywhere in the world, and by no means do you need to do what I did to make things work. With that said, there are some really cool opportunities for people who are willing to relocate, and I want to touch on them in this video. There's also some real cons that you need to be aware of before you book that one-way plane ticket, and I'm going to talk about those as well. Then we're going to get into my top 3 places that I would personally look at if I were thinking of moving overseas again right now. So first, let's cover the good stuff. Depending on where you're from, the most obvious difference moving can make is an economic one. Unless you move to central London or New York City or something like that, odds are the places you'll be looking at least the places I was most interested in, had a much cheaper cost of living than Canada. When I first moved to Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, if I budgeted well, I could get by pretty comfortably for just over 500 bucks a month and definitely less than 1,000. Now, times change and prices obviously go up, and that was more than 10 years ago. But if you choose the place you're moving to carefully, you could save a ton of cash. A cheaper cost of living is good for freelance creatives in a couple of ways. Firstly, and maybe most obviously, you can take more risks and go after stories you think are interesting without worrying as much about money. If I want to go and shoot a project here in Canada, even with a bare bones budget and no crew, it's still going to cost quite a bit no matter how careful I am. Even just my monthly car insurance payments here in Vancouver, where I live now, are more than my monthly rent was in Phnom Penh. So it's a pretty big difference. Secondly, you don't need to earn as much, which when you're starting out can keep you in the game longer. If you're only getting the odd shooting gig here and there, you'll probably need a second job in order to survive in a lot of places. But if you bring your cost of living way down, like I did in Cambodia, you might find that one job a month is more than enough to keep you going, and there might even be some left over to invest in a personal project or savings. Now, before I go any further here, I need to say something that I think is really important. Even considering moving to another country automatically makes us some of the most privileged people on earth, and I know that earning $1,000 a month is way out of the realm of possibility for a lot of people. The global nomad trend of wealthy Westerners showing up in Bali or Tulum or wherever with MacBook Pros and then driving the prices up everywhere for locals is a real issue, and I want to be careful that I'm not just part of this problem. So if you do decide to relocate, please, please, please be the good kind of foreigner, the one who spends their money at the market instead of Costco, who eats street food instead of Starbucks, and at least makes enough of an attempt to learn the local language and culture so that you understand what's happening around you. Privilege is real, and as documentary filmmakers, we want to be involved and informed observers, not economic colonizers. And to be honest, I almost didn't make this video because I was kind of worried about the message it might give, so I hope I've gotten my point across here. At the same time though, living internationally has been so important in my life that I couldn't not make this video. But just make sure that you're in it for the right reasons, not just so that you can afford a happy hour and a massage every day. Hire locals, give help and advice to young people from that country, even if it means creating competition for yourself, and spread the love around as much as you can. The second major advantage you might find, and I definitely found, was that you'll probably find less competition than you might at home, depending on where you're from, of course, and where you're thinking of going. In a place like Phnom Penh, there were not a ton of photographers that the international newspapers and NGOs could hire for assignments. If you're in New York City, even though the opportunities might be world-class, you're going to go up against a ton of competition who are really good at what they do. Being the person on the ground who understands to get things done can make you extremely useful for producers, editors, or production companies that are going to be filming in your area. When I was in Mexico, for example, the fact that I was already in the country with all my own gear and could speak Spanish and function independently with just a fixer in a car absolutely got me a lot of high-profile jobs that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. In fact, pretty much all the big jobs I got in this business, from National Geographic to Netflix to Showtime, were pretty much all because I was there already. And if you're in a position to relocate too, I think you'll find that once you put in the hard work of establishing yourself, you might stand out a little bit more than you do in Manhattan. Next, and this one is probably the best reason of all, is that being in a new place expands your horizons and pushes you to create. When everything around you is new, you'll see stories everywhere in a way that you probably don't in a city where you've lived for 5 years. When I first got to Mexico, I was curious about everything because I didn't understand, and it pushed me to make personal projects on things that locals didn't really think about anymore. Everything from the way water was delivered, to the roving pickup trucks collecting old mattresses and appliances, to the insanely huge metro stations were fascinating to me and launched me in all sorts of creative directions. If you find yourself in Kigali or Rio or Istanbul, you'll probably find the same thing happens to you. The small things that make up the fabric of life are suddenly full of mystery and story potential, and at least for me, that gave me a huge creative burst of energy. That's not to say those same stories don't exist where you live now, but too much exposure can sometimes blind you to what's right in front of you. A change of scenery can change that fast. But before you sell all your furniture and take off, there's a couple of things to be aware of. Moving internationally isn't the solution to all your problems, and it won't suddenly turn you into a superstar filmmaker overnight, so I want to touch on the negatives as well. First off, establishing yourself can be really hard. In Mexico, I realized quickly I needed to learn Spanish fast if I wanted to make it, and even though I did, it wasn't easy. All your daily routines are disrupted, and the effect can be pretty jarring and even lonely. You're gonna have to put in some serious work to get the ball rolling in a new place, and for some people, it's not gonna be worth it. You can't just land in Kuala Lumpur and wait for the offers to come rolling in, so be prepared for that. Networking is going to be crazy important for filmmakers who move, so be ready for that too. I also made a free guide to networking that might help a bit here, so I'll link to that in the description if you want to check it out. Moving can also be very lonely, especially at the start. All your friends are in other time zones, and it's going to take some time to feel like you're part of a social circle again. The good news is that just by the nature of being part of the filmmaking and photography scene, you'll have a reason to reach out to others, both local and foreign, and introduce yourself. Just let them know that you're a new filmmaker in town, and a lot of people are pretty willing to meet in my experience. That's how I made friends in both Cambodia and Mexico, and some of those people are still my closest friends today. Just know that the start can be tough, especially if you're going alone, but with time and effort, it will get better. Another thing to think about is the visa situation. Not all countries are just going to let you in for unlimited amounts of time without a work permit, and it's going to be up to you to factor that into your decision to move. A big reason I went to Cambodia was that you could just pay for a business visa on arrival at the airport, and so I was never worried about being deported. Mexico was slightly more complicated and involved me leaving the country at least every 6 months, but I knew all that going in and I was careful to stick to the laws. The last thing you want is to get deported with all your gear stuck in the country and have to scramble to find a new place to live. It wouldn't be fun, and so stick to places places where you're actually allowed to be. If I haven't scared you off, and as long as you go into this with full awareness of the challenges you might face, I really do credit living internationally as the reason why my career got started so quickly. At this stage, I'm honestly pretty happy to be back in Canada after 15 years away, but if I were going to do it again, there are 3 places I'd probably consider first. Mexico City is one, and it holds a really special place in my heart. Spanish is very learnable as a language, there are a million stories to tell, and it's a huge market that links the US and Latin America. The food is insane, and Mexicans are some of the warmest people on earth, just to name a few. Mexico City is a major hub for Central America, and as a documentary filmmaker, I think there are a ton of possibilities here. I heard that the post-COVID remote work economy is starting to get a little full of relocating tech workers and crypto millionaires, but I still think there's huge potential in Mexico City. Next is Bangkok, which is one of my favorite places ever. Bangkok is the main hub for Southeast Asia. It's very affordable, it's really safe, and it's full of energy. From Bangkok, you can get anywhere in the region really quickly, and if I were interested in going back to Asia to live, I'd probably go to Bangkok in a heartbeat. I actually still have a lot of friends there, and on top of that, the food and people are wonderful, and there is a really good community of creative people for you to network with. Of all the places I'm mentioning, Bangkok's probably the safest and easy to experience as a foreigner, even though it might seem pretty chaotic at first glance. Lastly, I personally might think about Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. This is definitely for more adventurous kind of filmmakers, but Kenya is the gateway to West Africa, and also near enough to the Middle East that you'd be in the running for jobs there too. It's a little rougher around the edges than Bangkok or Mexico City, but English is widely spoken, Kenyans are insanely friendly, and the landscapes and wildlife outside the city are some of the most incredible in the world. If you've ever felt drawn to Africa and are ready for a bit more of a challenge, I'd definitely consider Nairobi as a place to base myself. If you've got any other ideas for places you like around the world that I didn't mention, let me know in the comments. Okay, so there it is, my take on the pros and cons of living internationally as a filmmaker, and my top 3 picks for places I'd look at if I were going to do it again. Like I said, be the good kind of foreigner and make sure you're in it for the right reasons. And if you're considering a move like this, I'd love to hear about it down below. Hope you liked that video and that maybe it helped you in your decision on where to live as a documentary filmmaker. If you did like that one, like and subscribe as always, and maybe think about checking out this other video I made all about networking. See ya!